Chapter 1. The Rover's Return. On a certain summer morning, about the middle of the present century, a big bluff man, of seafaring aspect, found himself sauntering in a certain street near London Bridge. He was a man of above 50, but looked under 40 in consequence of the healthful vigour of his frame, the freshness of his saltwater face, and the blackness of his shaggy hair. Although his gait, pilot cloth coat, and pocketed hands proclaimed him a sailor, there were one or two contradictory points about him. A huge beard and mustache savoured more of the diggings than the deep, and a brown wide awake with a prodigiously broad brim suggested the backwoods. Pausing at the head of one of those narrow lanes which, running down between warehouses, filthy little rag-and-bone shops, and low poverty-stricken dwellings, appear to terminate their career, not unwillingly, in the Thames, the sailor gazed before him with nautical earnestness for a few seconds, then glanced at the corner house for a name, found no name, cast his eyes up to the strip of blue sky overhead, as if for inspiration, obtained none, planted his legs wide apart as if he had observed a squall coming, and expected the lane to lurch heavily, wrinkled his eyebrows, and pursed his lips. "Lost bearings, Cap'n," exclaimed a shrill pert voice at his side. The seaman looked down and beheld a small boy with a head like a disorderly door-mat, and garments to match. He stood in what may be styled an imitative attitude, with his hands thrust into his ragged pockets, his little legs planted wide apart, his cap thrust well back on his head, and his eyebrows wrinkled. He also pursed his lips to such an extent that they resembled a rosebud in a dirty bush. "Yes, imp," replied the seaman. He meant to have said impudence, but stopped at the first syllable as being sufficiently appropriate. "Yes, imp, I have lost my bearings, and I'll give you a copper if you'll help me to find 'em." "What sort o' copper?" demanded the urchin. "There's 3 sorts of 'em, you know, in this 'ere kingdom, which appears to be a queendom at present. There's a farding and a halfpenny and a penny. I mention it, Cap'n," he added apologetically, "in case you don't know, for you look as if you'd come from furrin parts." The seaman's look of surprise melted into a broad grin of amusement while this speech was being fluently delivered. At its conclusion he pulled out a penny and held it up. "Well, it ain't much," said the small boy, "and I ain't used to hire myself out so cheap. However, as you seem to be rather poorly off, I don't mind if I lend you a hand for that. Only, please, don't mention it among your friends, as it would p'raps lower their opinion of you, do you see? Now then, what do you want to know?" To this the cap'n, still smiling at the small boy's precocious insolence, replied that he was in search of an old woman who dwelt in a small court styled Grubb's Court, so he was told, which lay somewhere in that salubrious neighbourhood, and asked if he, the imp, knew of such a place. "Knows of it? I should think I does. I lives there. It's right down at the foot o' this 'ere lane, and a werry sweet ristocratic spot it is, quite a peninsular, bein land, leastwise mud, almost surrounded by water, the air bein ighly conducive to the 'ealth of rats, likewise cats. As to old women, there's rather a broad sprinklin' of 'em in the court, rangin' from the ages of 70 to 120, more or less, and you'll take some time to go over 'em all, Cap'n, if you don't know your old woman's name." "Her name is Roby," said the seaman. "Oh, Roby, ah," returned the small boy, looking sedately at the ground, "let me see, yes, that's the name of the old 'ooman, I think, what 'angs out in the cabin, right, and stair, top floor, end of the passage, where a most wysiders flattens their noses, by consequence of there bein' no light, and a step close to the door which invariably trips 'em up. Most wysiders to that old 'ooman begins their acquaintance with her by knocking at her door with their noses instead of their knuckles. We calls her place the cabin, 'cause the windows is rather small, and over'angs the river." "Well then, my lad," said the seaman, "clap a stopper on your tongue, if you can, and heave ahead." "All right, Cap'n," returned the small boy, "foller me, and don't be frightened. Port your helm a bit here, there's a quicksand in the middle o' the track, so, steady." Avoiding a large pool of mud with which the head of the lane was garnished, and which might have been styled the bathing, not to say wallowing, quarters of the Grubbs Court juveniles, the small boy led the bluff seaman towards the river without further remark, diverging only once from the straight road for a few seconds, for the purpose of making a furious rush at a sleeping cat with a yell worthy of a Cherokee savage, or a locomotive whistle, a slight pleasantry which had the double effect of shooting the cat through space in glaring convulsions, and filling the small boy's mind with the placidity which naturally follows a great success. The lane presented this peculiarity, that the warehouses on its left side became more and more solid and vast and tall as they neared the river, while the shops and dwellings on its right became poorer, meaner, and more diminutive in the same direction, as if there were some mysterious connection between them, which involved the adversity of the one in exact proportion to the prosperity of the other. Children and cats appeared to be the chief day population of the place, and these disported themselves among the wheels of enormous wagons, and the legs of elephantine horses with an impunity which could only have been the result of lifelong experience. The seaman was evidently unaccustomed to such scenes, for more than once during the short period of his progress down the lane, he uttered an exclamation of alarm, and sprang to the rescue of those large babies which are supposed to have grown sufficiently old to become nursing mothers to smaller babies, acts which were viewed with a look of pity by the small boy, and called from him the encouraging observations, "Keep your mind easy, Cap'n, they're all right, bless you, the hosses knows 'em, and wouldn't you rt 'em on no account." "This is Grubbs Court," said the boy, turning sharply to the right and passing through a low archway. "Thank ye, lad," said the seaman, giving him a sixpence. The small boy opened his eyes very wide indeed, exclaiming, "Hullo! I say, Cap'n, what's this?" at the same time, however, putting the coin in his pocket with an air which plainly said, "Whether you've made a mistake or not, you needn't expect to get it back again." Evidently the seaman entertained no such expectations, for he turned away and became absorbed in the scene around him. It was not cheering. Though the summer sun was high and powerful, it failed to touch the broken pavement of Grubbs Court, or to dry up the moisture which oozed from it and crept up the walls of the surrounding houses. Everything was very old, very rotten, very crooked, and very dirty. The doorways round the court were wide open, always open, in some cases, because of there being no doors, in other cases, because the tenements to which they led belonged to a variety of families, largely composed of children who could not, even on tiptoe, reach or manipulate door handles. Nursing mothers of 2 feet high were numerous, staggering about with nurslings of a foot and a half long. A few of the nurslings, temporarily abandoned by the premature mothers, lay sprawling, in some cases squalling, on the moist pavement, getting over the ground like large snails, and leaving slimy tracks behind them. Little boys, of the city Arab type, were sprinkled here and there, and one or two old women sat on doorsteps contemplating the scene, or conversing with one or two younger women. Some of the latter were busy washing garments so dirty, that the dirty water of old Father Thames seemed quite a suitable purifier. "Gilly," cried one of the younger women referred to, wiping the soap suds from her red arms, "come here, you bad, naughty boy. Where avenue you been? I want you to mind baby." "We, mother," cried the small boy, who answered to the name of Gilly, "don't you see I'm engaged? I'm a showin' this air sea cap'n the course he's got to steer for port. He wants to make the cabin of old Mother Roby." "We don't you do it quickly, then," demanded Gilly's mother, "you bad, naughty, wicked boy. Beg your parding, sir," she added, to the seaman, "the boy ain't got no sense, besides bein' wicked and naughty, 'e ain't 'ad no train, sir, that's where it is, all along of my avenue'n too much to do, an' a large family, sir, with no U.S. band to speak of, right up the stair, sir, to the top, and along the passage door straight before you at the hend of it. Mind the step, sir, when you gets up. Go up with the gentleman, you bad, wicked, naughty boy, and show." The remainder of the sentence became confused in distance, as the boy and the seaman climbed the stair, but a continuous murmuring sound, as of a vocal torrent, conveyed the assurance that the mother of Gilly was still holding forth. "'Ere it is," said the young pilot, pausing at the top of the staircase, near the entrance to a very dark passage. "Keep EAD as she goes, but I'd recommend you to shorten sail, mind your elm, and avenue the anchor ready to let go." Having thus accommodated his language to the supposed intelligence of the seaman, the elfin youth stood listening with intense eagerness and expectation as the other went into the passage, and, by sundry kicks and bumps against wooden walls, gave evidence that he found the channel intricate. Presently a terrible kick occurred. This was the seaman's toe against the step, of which he had been warned, but which he had totally forgotten. Then a softer, but much heavier blow, was heard, accompanied by a savage growl. That was the seaman's nose and forehead against old Mrs. Roby's portal. At this, Gilly's expectations were realized, and his joy consummated. With mischievous glee sparkling in his eyes, he hastened down to the court to exhibit his sixpence to his mother, and to announce to all whom it might concern, that the sea cap'n had run his jib boom slap through the old 'ooman's cabin door.